What happens when law, business, and life collide? Each week on Lead Counsel, your host Tom Tona will take a deep dive into topics related to the law, the business of law, and life. There will be insightful discussions with industry insiders, experts, and thought leaders making significant contributions and meaningful differences in their fields of expertise. Tom is the founder and managing attorney at TonaLaw. He has been a practicing attorney since 1994 and the leader of TonaLaw since it opened in 2001. The goal of this podcast is to provide you with free information on law and the business of law, and to give you actionable tools related to each of these areas. Now, here's Tom.
Hey, welcome back to the Lead Counsel podcast. This is your host, Tom Tona. I'm here with my host, Juliet, and we have a special guest today. Jules, how are you today?
Hi, I'm doing great.
Good? Everything's good? All right. Yep. So you ready for this interview?
I'm excited.
All right.
This one's going to be good.
The special guest is my longtime friend and law firm coach that I refer to very often all over social media and whenever I get a chance to talk about coaching in general, Patrick Wilson, who's with Atticus. I think he's one of their longest standing coaches. Patrick, how are you today?
Good, Tom. I'm good. Hey, Juliet, how are you?
Hi, we're glad to have you on. Very excited.
Yeah, we're recording this on July 5th, man. So we all just had a long weekend. We're all ripped up and jazzed.
I don't normally go into like the bios too much because I know people tend to like not want to drag it out. But Patrick and I go back almost 10 years now, right, Patrick?
It's something like that. Yeah, it's 7 or 8 at least.
Yeah, I want to say it's close to 10. You came into my life when I was going through a black swan. I met you fortuitously at a Atticus event. And I was really struggling with this black swan. For anybody that doesn't know what a black swan is, it's an unexpected event in life or in business that kind of throws you for a loop. Not only did Patrick help me and the business survive and withstand the black swan, I mean, it was pretty significant. We can get into more details in a little bit. But Patrick, I stuck with Patrick for the last 7 years since the black swan, basically to help me get to the point where we're at now. And I would never be at the point that we're at now without your presence in my life. So thank you for that, Patrick. And coaching with you has been just awesome. So thank you.
It's been fun. Yeah, but I remember that well. I met you in Dallas and you started working together. And like 6 seconds later, you had this black swan. I felt like I was your bad luck charm. You hired me. And then
I actually was in the middle of it when I met you. I hired you because I was in the black swan already.
Okay, I was thinking you hired me and then it happened. But yeah, it was right off the bat. It was
so
trouble.
Just to refresh your memory really quick, Patrick, in my no-fault collection silo, the American Arbitration Association that administers all of the arbitrations basically for 6 months didn't give anybody hearings.
Oh, no, I remember that.
So my no-fault silo was bleeding about $50,000 a month, and I couldn't figure out where or why until we were able to troubleshoot and diagnose where the bleed was and what we could do as alternatives. So it was actually a really interesting growing experience going through it with you. But for your calm and steady demeanor and helping me troubleshoot everything, I'm not sure how I would have made it through it. So again, I really do appreciate that. So let's dive right in. Patrick, one, you're a licensed attorney, right?
Yeah, I haven't practiced in 25 years, but yeah, I practiced in the 90s down in Orlando.
Right. And you, if I remember correctly, you're doing workers' compensation.
I did workers' compensation, insurance defense, did a little bit of First Amendment work, but yeah, mostly an insurance defense guy. So yeah, I wore a black hat to work every day, laughed at widows and orphans, took money out of the hands of the injured. I'm teasing. Right. Those people are humans too, but I realize that people listening to this podcast are mostly PI attorneys. And that's kind of funny because, as you know, I've been at Atticus. It'll be 24 years next month. And during that time, probably 50 to 60% of my clientele have been PI attorneys. So I have an affinity for personal injury attorneys. And if I were 24 years old again, I would have gotten into personal injury, but I didn't know myself as well back then. So I got into defense.
Yeah, I think you said something like 75% of your clientele is personal injury firms.
Yeah, it's varied between half and 3/4 throughout my career. So I've worked with a ton of personal injury firms.
The transition from practicing attorney to lawyer coach is probably one that a lot of our listeners are going to be jealous of, right? So many lawyers that are not happy, not doing what they love to do, that dream about getting out. How did you make the transition 26 years ago from practicing lawyer to say, I want to become a coach?
Yeah, it was kind of funny. It was a couple of things coming together at the same time. One is as I mentioned, I was practicing in Orlando at the time, which is where Atticus is headquartered. And so they have a big footprint in Florida. People in Florida know them more than other parts of the country. So I got a flyer or something. I don't know. I went for a half-day seminar. I went to a half-day seminar, and it was on Friday morning at this hotel in Orlando. And we had like a tropical storm or tropical depression moving in on top of us over the weekend. So rather than go back to my office, I just went home. And I don't even know why. I honestly have no idea why I went, because I was completely skeptical. I was so incredibly skeptical. They were going around Florida making two promises back then. We'll help you make more money, and we'll help you do it in less time. More money, less time. Well, I'm a bill by the hour lawyer. If you're a bill by the hour lawyer, you think I can't make more money in less time, right? The only way to make more money is to bill more hours. The only way to bill more hours is to work more time. And so it was obviously just sales BS. Somehow I went to the seminar anyway. And I walked to the seminar going, holy crap, I really can make more money in less time. And why didn't anybody teach me any of these things in law school, right? All this stuff, practical stuff. Because I'd been out there for several years in a small firm, hiring people, no idea what I was doing. Marketing, no idea what I was doing. Time management, I was terrible, right? All these basic how to function in office things, I just was no good at. I mean, I shouldn't say I was no good at. I was good at marketing. I was pretty good with my people, but it was all just sort of guesswork. It was just because I was naturally good at it. I had no strategy, right? Nothing was thought out. Nothing was systematic. Anyway, so I saw that they had systems and real answers for the kind of problems, particularly small firm lawyers were facing. And they gave us two books. One was this big old thick, sort of a 3-ring binder that had the material from the half-day seminar. And the other was a book, I should have grabbed it. It's back there somewhere behind me, called The E-Myth Revisited. Business books are a genre like horror or romance. The E-Myth Revisited, is a classic, right? It's been out there 30, 40 years. Everybody should read it. It's really, really good. And so with the tropical storm coming home, I just went home and had nothing to do all weekend but sit and read these books. And by Sunday night, I joke, I had the lawyer's equivalent of like a Pentecostal conversion, right? I fell to my knees. I raised my hands to the heavens. I repented of all my practice management sins. And my next call was to Atticus, like, hey, are you guys hiring? And it was at a time where I was at a transition point. I was doing a lot of workers' comp. I could tell in the legislature that the insurance industry, which is very strong in Florida, was going to kill workers' comp and drive all the lawyers out of it, which may not have been the worst thing. It was really a dumb system, but that's a side point. But that's how I made my living. And so I thought, I got to retool and get into a different practice area. So I thought, hey, I'll go work for Atticus. One of two things happens, right? I worked there a year and I learned how to really operate my practice in a professional way, like I actually know what I'm doing. And then I go back to practicing law and I do it at a much higher level. Or Atticus was still kind of small at the time. It's almost like you might think of it as a startup. I get in on the ground floor. I mean, this is 1999. Nobody's doing coaching for lawyers. This may be, I'm no kidding, maybe a dozen people in the whole country. And back then, we were the only organization, right? There were just individual guys. Oh, yeah, I'm a lawyer coach. I'm a lawyer coach, right? But Atticus was the only organization. I thought, well, maybe I get on the ground floor and this takes off and I make a career out of it. And 24 years later, here I am. So
it's really interesting because there's no accidents, they say, right?
Yeah.
Like, this tropical storm hits, you go home and read these two books and you have this huge epiphany. This is what you want to do. It's your calling, right?
Yeah. So that's the thing. Like I liked practicing law. I was pretty good at it. I wasn't great. I wasn't the best lawyer in town, but I was good. And I liked it, but I didn't love it. But I've loved Atticus, right? This is what I was made for.
100%. It's your calling. I mean, I can't imagine you doing anything else. What do you love about it?
Oh man, two things. Number one, I'm really restless, right? I get bored easy. And so I work with really smart people. I mean, lawyers are smarter than average people. I mean, to get a doctoral degree, you got to be pretty smart. My clients are on the more successful than average end of the spectrum among lawyers. So they're probably really, really smart. So I'm working with really smart people and complicated problems every day. And my clients are all really nice. So anyway, I've never been bored. There were plenty of days when I was a lawyer and that I was bored. 24 years, I've never been bored. It's always smart people with interesting problems every day. And I love that part about it. I love the problem solving. And the second part I like about it is I've been you, right? I've been the guy sweating payroll. I've been the guy like, do I fire this person? I keep talking to them. They don't get better. They're nice. They're so nice. They've got kids, that whole thing, but they're just not panning out. What do I do? And I had nobody to give me the answer. I've sweated all the kind of problems that small law firms sweat, right? This kind of stuff that keeps you up at night. So I know what it means to have somebody that can give you guidance, that has some answers, right? Because I didn't have it. So if you look at my disc, we were joking earlier before the podcast started. If you look at my disc, I'm a borderline sociopath. Like I say that, people that know me laugh, because I seem so nice. But really, all it would take is if I just had one bad parent, either one, pick one, mom or dad. If one of them had been bad, I was 100%, because I have no empathy. I have no empathy. My wife and kids will tell you this, right? Dad has no empathy.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have empathy for entrepreneurs. I do have empathy.
Yeah,
you've been in
said
their
that
shoes.
before. You've said that before.
And it's kind of funny because in our society, empathy is like a big value, right? It's a big value, but it's not, it's kind of narrow, right? It's kind of narrow. We're not taught to have empathy for the man, right? We're not taught to have empathy for that person, but that's the person that creates jobs that everybody else works in, right? That's the person that moves the needle in the world as the entrepreneur, the one that will take the risk to go out there and start a business. That's a huge amount of risk. You go bankrupt, you lose sleep, right? There's all kinds of, you have people, most businesses fail, right? It's a huge risk you're taking. And I just have such immense respect for people that are willing to do that. And having done it kind of myself, I just have empathy for how hard it is. So anyway.
You have an interesting perspective over most people, which I think makes you fit to be a law firm coach, especially to law firm owners.
I think if you've never owned a business, maybe it looks easy. It's like anything else you haven't done, it looks easy. Or you think maybe they're entitled, they were born that way. Well, the reality is almost all the entrepreneurs I know have worked really hard and sacrificed a lot to build their business. And it's kind of invisible. Mm-hmm. Nobody knows it or appreciates it.
Yeah, truer words have never been spoken, man. It's crazy. A lot of times I'll sit in a meeting. It's typically with the younger demographic team members and be like, listen, before we have any conversation about anything, I need you to not literally, but figuratively sit in my seat,
right,
and understand the following things, because no one feels bad for the people on the other side of the desk is basically what you're saying. Not that, listen, this is the life we chose. So I don't need anybody to feel bad, but I do need people to have an understanding, right? As far as why certain policies are in place and stuff like that. So you bring up a very interesting point, because I think that comes through in your coaching and why I think you're so popular as a coach, and why I think you've told me that many of your clients are very long-standing clients. I mean, I've been with you like 10 years. I started to calculate my coaching bill just with Atticus is probably near $400,000. It's probably like $400,000, but you know what? You provide the value. Every conversation we have, it may not even be immediate. I might get off the call and be like, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. But then I take off a week and I solve the issue. I go, oh, that's what he was talking about, right? Whatever issue it is I'm working on. So I think the value proposition with somebody like you've been doing it 26 years. Thank God you're the guy I crossed paths with. Like my problem complexity was so high at that point that you came into my life. I couldn't have had somebody who had like 2 years of experience coaching.
Yeah.
Right. This was outside the boundaries of time management, marketing, HR, and the other profitability equation. So, yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. In one of our calls recently, you described yourself as a coaching consultant. And you said there's a distinction between coaching and consulting. And I found it fascinating. And I thought it was a really valuable distinction. And I think that the people that are listening to this podcast would really benefit if you break down the difference between a coach and a consultant. Can they be both? When would they be both? That type of thing.
Yeah. And this is one of those things where there's no outside governing body that defines it, like there is a lawyer, right? There's nothing like the Bar Association for this. So you could ask 10 people and get 10 different responses. But yeah, coaching is essentially about asking good questions. You're not the expert. You're more like Socrates. So why are you doing it that way? Well, how does that make you feel? What's the worst that could happen if you tried this? So it's mostly about asking good questions. Being a consultant is much more about being the expert and providing the answers. Like, oh, Patrick, I got $10,000 to spend on marketing. Should I spend it on this or should I spend it on that? And why should I spend, tell me why you would recommend one way or the other. And that's where I need to have some expertise and say, oh, well, you should definitely spend it on this and not on that. And here's why. And so for years, we called ourselves coaches at Atticus. And because there's no body truly defining these terms, people started thinking it was really touchy-feely, like I was going to be like Oprah or something. And
that's not you. That's not you.
That's not me. And so I lean on the consultant side, but I don't want to be pigeonholed either one because my job is to make a difference for my client, right? And I will use whatever tool. I will browbeat you. I'll humiliate you. I'll cry for you. I'll pray for you. I'll ask really good questions. I'll try to provide really good answers. It's all about what does the client need? Of course, you get better at that over time, right? I'm better at this than I was 23 years ago because I've been 6 hours a day. I'm on the phone or Zoom with somebody talking to them about their practice. So
and the clientele you have also push you to be high level because they're super smart people for the most part, right?
Oh, yeah.
And they're demanding. Lord knows I'm demanding. So as a law firm business coach, what are your favorite business books that you would recommend to somebody who right now is not coaching and on the fence of coaching? Like I want to, but it's too expensive or I can't afford the time, whatever.
So it's something like there were actual two questions there. One was about what business books would I recommend? And one is, why would I do coaching? So, and maybe they're related. So first I would make a distinction. There are different kinds of business books. And one of the divides is between books that discuss principles and those that describe methods, right? Principles versus methods. So the principles books are kind of timeless, right? They can be really old because principles don't change, right? So you and I are both dads of teenagers, right? So discipline is a principle. Timeout is a method. Spanking is a method, right? I hope nobody's spanking their teenagers, but when they're little, right? I know good parents that spank and good parents that don't spank, right? That's a method, right? Disciplining your kids, teaching them to obey and not do dangerous things. All good parents do that. So on the principle side, Good to Great by Jim Collins is the best business book that was ever written, and that I've ever read, period. Everybody should read Good to Great. The principles there are just amazing. And the other one would be the book I referenced earlier, The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. So if you're running a small business and a law firm is a small business, the E-Myth is going to give you some really good distinctives, a way to think about your role and where you're spending your time, how you're defining yourself. And Good to Great's just such a great book because they based it on data and research. Collins was a professor at Stanford Business School at the time he wrote it. So he had all these business students that he could just go pour through tons and tons of data. And they came to the study with some presuppositions about what made for great companies. And the data turned about half of those presuppositions on their head.
Okay.
So when you read a business book from some business leader, so let's say Elon Musk writes a book about running a business. Here's what I know, and here's what the reader doesn't maybe know. I know that Musk succeeded by doing 80% right and 20% wrong, but he doesn't know the 20% stuff he did that was stupid, right? Because the 80% overwhelmed it. So when you read his business book, 20% of it's bad advice. Or 10% or whatever.
Interesting.
Right? I mean, have you done everything right? Have I done everything right?
No.
No, none of us have, right? So when somebody like that reads a book, a lot of it's a decent percentage of it's bad advice, actually. And so that's why when you read a data-driven book that's based on research, right, it sifts out the wheat from the chaff, right? And so the stuff that doesn't really work. And of course, there's always issues with economies of scale. Good to Great was written for about Fortune 500 level companies, not seven member law firms or something.
Right.
You can interpret.
But you know what? A lot of the principles do apply.
The principles apply. Good to Great's a little meatier. It's like a good filet mignon, right? You got to chew on it, but there's a lot of nutrition there.
I find myself referencing it a lot, though. The hedgehog theory, the flywheel theory. Like I've seen these all come into play over the last 5 years. So it's interesting to
Well,
see.
you mentioned the hedgehog concept, which people, if they haven't read the book, they're like, hedgehog, what the heck is that? And I'll explain in a minute. But that was one of the questions on the podcast interview sheet, was about like a big game changer in your life. And that was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So in the book, Collins tells the story. It's one of the old Aesop's fables, but it's really just the Coyote and Roadrunner ancient Greece version, right? So you got the hedgehog who's playing the part of the Roadrunner, and he's kind of chubby and fat and not very stylish. And he just sort of waddles through the forest every day, going about his business. And then you've got the fox, who's very clever and energetic. And of course, the fox wants to eat the hedgehog. And so every day the fox brings some brand new strategy on the hedgehog to try to surprise him. And every day the hedgehog just rolls into a ball of spikes and defeats the fox. The fox can't get through the ball of spikes, and the fox goes off to come up with a new strategy the next day. And so the principle, the moral of the story is, it's better to know how to do one thing well than to constantly be trying something new and different, right? So it's about knowing yourself. So I call it your core identity. Who are you at your core? And translating a little bit from Jim Collins, because again, he's talking about Fortune 500 companies. So let's translate the world you and I live in, the smaller law firms. You got to know what you're passionate about. Passion, I know, has become kind of a hackneyed phrase over the last 10, 20 years in the business world, but there are things you really care about, and there are things you don't care about. And there are worthy things that you don't care about, and it doesn't make you a bad person. So I don't watch much TV anymore, but back in the day with cable TV, I'm flipping through, and I'm watching Sports Center or something, and the Feed the Children commercial comes on, right? And you got the African baby with the distended belly and the flies. And I am going over to ESPN2 so quick, it'll make your head spin, right? Now, does that mean I'm for African poverty or I hate orphans? No, it just means that there are many causes in the world. That's not one that gets me excited, right? And we've all got stuff like that. But there is stuff that you are truly excited about, right? What really gets you going, right? And you got to think about that, because you can't make a living with something you don't really care about. You can't get up out of bed day after day and excite and inspire a whole team of people to follow you over something that you're kind of meh about, right? It's never going to work. You got to be passionate about it. And then number two, you got to have real talent for it. And talent is a gift. Talent is a gift. Talent's not, you can develop talent, but you can also develop non-talent. You got to be passionate about it. You got to be naturally talented at it. And of course, you got to make money. It's got to be profitable for you to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I see in business is the temptation is to chase money about things you're not passionate about. That's the classic mistake.
Yeah.
And so I remember when I read the book, it set me to think. I'd already made the move to Atticus, and I was already clear that I was sort of born to be a coach, business consultant, whatever. But within that world, I didn't know exactly what my identity was. And that set me on a path to thinking. And I just meditated on that for about a year. And then I got really clear about sort of who I am as a coach and what I'm good at as a coach and who I work with really well as a coach. And that was a game changer, because I make much faster decisions that are much higher quality.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that crazy?
That's awesome.
Because normally you think, you better slow down and get it right. But once I got clear on my identity, 10 times faster decisions and 10 times better results.
Because you trust your instincts.
Yes.
You trust your instincts.
And I know myself. I know myself, and I know who I work best with and who I'm going to help. And so, that's part of why I work with so many PI lawyers. That's part of the equation for me.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is? As far as why you think it was like because again, you didn't start out saying, I'm only going to work with PI firms, right?
No,
but there's been a natural attraction for you to PI clients and vice versa, PI clients to you. So why do you think that is? What's the affinity for personal injury lawyers?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think the biggest is, on average, among all practice areas, criminal law, estate planning, whatever, on average, personal injury lawyers are the most entrepreneurial, right? They're the most likely to think, this is a business, I need to run it like a business. So they already have the right mindset. And when you go to law school, they don't talk at all about running a business. I talked to recent graduates, and they still have very little, if any, business mindset, because the classes are taught by professors who've probably never run a law firm, right? They went to law.
Yeah, I think that's...
They went to Georgetown and made good grades, and then they clerked for Judge so-and-so, and now they're teaching at your university, and they've never made payroll.
And I think that law school is so lacking that they either need to free up at least 6 months to a year for training on how to run a law firm for small law firms, or extend it out a year. God forbid they did that when I was there. I probably wouldn't have graduated. But one way or another, they're not equipping students at all for the practicalities of private practice at all. You know, it's you come out, you've learned the real world applications are not, they're just not there.
As you guys know, right, personal injury lawyers don't have the best reputation in the world, right? So lawyers in general don't, and PI lawyers in particular don't. And it's such a shame. It's such a shame because you guys are the dragon killers. Or at least tamers, right? You keep these corporations from just utterly abusing the common guy.
Yeah, I think part of that reputation comes from the marketing model a lot of guys and women and firms have adopted, which is, I mean, if I see one more LinkedIn post says verdict alert, $40,000 settlement, you keep putting out that stuff versus talking about the why, right? It wasn't until, God, I'm in my 29th year of practice, and I finally drilled down on the why I do what I do every day. What gets me out of bed? And it has nothing to do with the money.
Yeah.
Right? It's fighting for what's right. So whether it's a no-fault client who's owed $500,000 or a personal injury client who was hit by a drunk driver and ends up brain damaged, they need somebody that can do what you said. And what I think is awesome about what you do with personal injury firms is a lot of times people like me, we don't have partners to turn to. And even if it's funny because when you're coming up as an associate, you hear, oh, we're going into a partners meeting. Just because you have partners doesn't mean any of the partners sitting in a room behind closed doors know what the hell they're doing, right?
Or care. They just want to practice law, right? You worry about the business stuff. Right. I just want to practice law.
Right. And what's awesome about you, the company Atticus, and all of the coaches like you is you guys actually know what you're doing, right? So if I come to you with a problem, you kind of have a matrix that you'll take us through to help diagnosis and a framework, right? That unless, and I know the higher up I go in this type of training, I realize just how few people really know this stuff. And I don't care, like Patrick knows, I referred him to somebody recently. You could be making multiple 7 figures. That still doesn't mean that you know what you're doing, right? It doesn't mean you don't need a coach. You need a coach probably more than ever if you're making 7 figures or more and haven't hired a coach. So I think that you provide a very valuable service. And I know that it's really enriched my practice and my life. And I hope that anybody that's listening to this, maybe it won't be Patrick because he has been there very long and he's one of the more expensive or pricier investments in terms of coaching. But anybody at Atticus, at whatever level you're at, they'll have a program that fits you economically. Yeah. Right? There's going to be something you can afford. I'm always dumbfounded when somebody says, I can't afford it. It's too expensive. I'm like, really? Yeah. So you've never heard the saying that if you think education's important, wait till you find out about ignorance. It's the same thing.
Yeah. So I mean, I get it. Like I said, I've been the guy sweating payroll and looking around saying, where's that money going to come from? I totally get it. And not many attorneys have done business coaching, right? So it's still a rather unusual experience among lawyers. Right. So it's
right.
So it's an investment in something that is a little unusual. It's a little weird and you don't know about the return on investment. So I kind of get it. So I don't know if you remember this, but I've always offered what I call the 90-day test drive. Right. Is that in the first 90 days, if I can't find a way to make it valuable, now you got to communicate with me, right? If something's not working for you, let me know. But if I can't find a way to make it valuable in the first 90 days, you can ask for it and get all your money back.
Yeah,
by the way, I've done that once.
Yeah, well, listen, and you're always going to have that one guy. I was like, I don't care.
The one guy.
It wasn't the value. You're not going to have.
But yeah, but 100%. And this is part of what I love about working with you, right? You totally get ROI, right? What's the return on my investment? What's the return on my investment?
Would I ever spend $400,000 if I wasn't getting a massive return on that money? Come on. So for people, because I know I've referred people over to Atticus recently that are truly just starting out, do not have the capital. They barely can buy lunch. Yeah. They have like 4 cases to their name. They're just in the building stage. What are the 4 books that Atticus produces or publishes? I know one is Time Management for Attorneys.
Yeah, these I do have
One
right back
is,
here.
yeah. So tell us the names and the titles of those.
Yeah, so we got Time Management for Attorneys, straightforward. We've got How Good Attorneys Become Great Rainmakers. That's our marketing book.
Yep.
And by the way, this is all referral marketing stuff anybody can do for cheap.
Mm-hmm.
This is not big SEO spins. This is not a giant expensive pay-per-click campaign. This is building a strategic networking marketing thing that anybody can do. So if you're on a budget, that's great. Hire slow and fire fast, which is our it's more than just hiring and firing. It's our personnel management book, but the marketing people wanted to give it a sexier title. So it's hire slow and fire fast. And then, back to the straightforward naming, cash flow and profitability.
There you go. So those are the 4 cornerstones, right? So anybody is listening, depending on where you're at in the journey, pick up those 4 books. Now you can't say it's too expensive. It's a total of, I think, $200. And you start there, right? Yeah. Until you can afford the group coaching or whatever the cost-effective methods are. But don't do nothing. Don't sit there and suffer. Right? Do something. Pick up those books.
Pick up those books. We also have a program called Rainmakers. And I'm sorry, I won't swear to this. I think it's $199 a month, or $200 a month. That's a year-long marketing training program that gives you the what to do, the how to do it, and gives you some accountability. One part of coaching we didn't talk about is accountability, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I do want to emphasize this. This is all of the people listening, right, have had great ideas that don't go anywhere. Right. They just never get around to it. So a good coach will hold you accountable and make you do stuff. So my mom and my wife, before we had kids, were both school teachers. So I assign my clients during every call what I call homework, right? I'm going to give you some practical things to do between this week's call and the next call, right? And after a little chit chat on the next call, I'm going to ask pretty quickly, how did it go with the homework? Now, I don't do it as much with you 10 years in, but when you're first in, you're very much in the training phase, right? And there's accountability and you got to do it. And I don't know, once every week or two, my client will get on the call having not done it. And I'll just say, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to hop off of Zoom for 20 minutes and you're going to do it. And then we're going to hop back on, right?
Right.
So, and what I've noticed is if I assign somebody some homework, and let's say we're going to talk next Wednesday at 12, they're going to do 80% of the time, they're going to do the homework between 8 and noon the next Wednesday.
That's right. But they're going to do it.
Because deadlines drive action, and having someone to hold you accountable drives action, right? So if you've ever worked out with a personal trainer, you get that, right? You've put some money down and you've got an appointment and you don't feel good, right? You got no energy and you didn't sleep well last night or whatever. And if it was just up to you, you wouldn't go to the gym, but dang it, I paid some money. I got an appointment. I'm going to show up. And then the guy kicks your butt, right? And you work out really hard, right? So having a coach is kind of like that, right? It pushes you, it gives you some accountability, makes you show up when you.
Well, that's where all the value comes in, right? Like if you think about the premise of DYM, right? One of the things in the Dominate Your Market program was they wanted us to innovate something that had never been done.
Right.
Well, if we didn't have a cadence of accountability, 4 meetings out of the year where there's a check-in, how's it going? Is it done? It's not going to get done. Right?
This is the fundamental problem. All your stuff over here we'll call the practice of law, right? You got deadlines that drive action, right? You got a deposition coming up next Thursday. You got a hearing on Friday. You got a client coming in for something, right? Everything in the practice of law is like a time bomb, right? It's got a due date and an explosive negative consequence if you blow past that due date, right?
Yep.
Right. File that suit one day after the statute of limitations, just one day. Right? What happens? Calling you a malpractice carrier, right? You got a pissed off client and you made no money on the case, right? So everything in the practice of law gets attention because it's a time bomb, right? It's got a deadline and a really tangible negative consequence. Everything over here in the business management side, you can procrastinate on, right? That employee who's been coming in 10 minutes late that you told your spouse last night you were going to deal with this morning, and you came in this morning and they were on time and you had some other meeting and so you didn't talk to them, and that's happened like 30 straight days, right? Where they keep coming in late and you keep swearing you're going to have the conversation. And what terrible thing happened today because you didn't talk to them? Nothing. They just keep coming late, right? You were going to go marketing. You're going to do a marketing lunch today. and you were too busy, right? So you called up your buddy and said, hey, man, I'm just slammed. Can we do that some other time? And your buddy says, of course, yes, right? And what's the consequence? Did you go bankrupt tomorrow because you didn't do the marketing lunch today? So everything over here on the running the business side is not like a time bomb. You can procrastinate on it. So what gets
Right.
done?
It's almost like a slow creep. It's like a slow creep, I call
Well,
it.
then look at your education. 100% of your law school education is practice of law. 0 classes in law school on managing a business. Your CLEs, all on the practice of law. 0 on running a business. So you've got all your education and all your urgency around the practice of law. You've got 0 education and 0 urgency around managing your business.
Yep.
Now, I'm not saying that practice of law is unimportant. Obviously, it's super important, right? It'd be stupid to say it's not important. It's like saying, well, it's okay to be a mediocre surgeon. Be excellent, right? Be excellent. But I trust that that's already happening, right? You've already got a doctoral degree in that, right? You're getting CLEs every year on that. I trust you're on top of that. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about this over here that you're neglecting because you can procrastinate on it. So some of the people are listening need to really hear this, right? You've got all the stuff that's got no kind of deadline. When and how are you going to develop the discipline to do all this stuff that's got no deadline when all this other stuff has got deadline? Right? And
you won't without that cadence of accountability.
Yeah,
you won't.
And that's where coaching can be really, 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 really helpful. And especially.
But the interesting thing, go ahead, sorry.
And it gets more interesting. So initially, people are most of your clients, 95, 98% of their time is on the practice of law, and 3 to 5% over here on the business management. Now you're quite different. What percentage for you is practice law now?
About 0,
Close to 0,
basically.
right?
I'm 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So, which means you have no deadlines for anything now, right? And so that gets really tough. Like structuring your whole day when you don't have any deadlines today. I'm sure it's not any, right? I'm sure you've got appointments, right? But it's very different. So it requires a really high degree of self-discipline to be the entrepreneur, to really get entrepreneur.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if you just sat at home and ate Fritos and watched TV all day, nobody's going to know or care. You didn't miss anything.
But you know what? It's funny because coaching, in addition to the accountability it provides professionally, it sounds silly, but the accountability is what moves the needle.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's what's so special about coaching. As long as the coach is a qualified coach, right? It's like everything else. There's a lot of coaches out there using the name. But again, like you've done this for like 26 years. And I know Atticus has a formal training program. I think they put you through formal training, right?
Yep.
So it wasn't like, oh, they signed you up, slapped a label on you, said, okay, go get on the phone with people, right? You got formal training for that.
Yeah.
And again, I'm at the point now, I get calls or reach outs on social media almost daily, asking for not only for advice on coaching, asking me to coach. And, I've already talked to you about this, but I just don't feel comfortable without structure and proper training to do that. But so it's an interesting path that the talk took, because I think I said it when I was talking to one of our other guests, James Joseph, that coaching not only changed my practice, it changed my life. Like coaching with both Atticus and with you, it's made me a better husband, a better father. And I think what's super valuable about Atticus is they make you reprioritize, because too many lawyers are caught up in the wrong thing.
Right.
If I only make $1 million, then I'm successful and then I'm happy. And they're not. And if you don't make it the right way, it's short-lived. And so, I think, it's been an interesting process. And going through it with you, because you're so good at what you do, I've just been very fortunate. So thank you for that. I really do appreciate it.
I'll say this if you're looking for a coach, consultant, it's okay if it doesn't work, but try another one. I'd make this analogy. I've been to counseling several times in my life, right? I'm a bit of a mess. But
you and everybody else we know.
I'm not as much of a mess as I used to be, thanks to counseling. But I've been several times with varying degrees of help, right? So because the quality of the counselors varied. Some were great, some were not so great. So anybody can call themselves a coach, right? So if you've had a bad experience with coaching, don't assume that all coaches are therefore unhelpful. I'd maybe try again. And then sometimes there's a personality fit. Good. Even within Atticus, we swap clients around every now and then because maybe there's a personality that would fit better every now and then, but you just sort of reach a dry spell with somebody and you need a fresh start with somebody else. So Yeah. So I would say if you've had a bad experience with the coaching, don't be afraid to try again and do it. If it's your first experience, first foray into coaching, then make sure you're getting your ROI. Make sure that the person that's coaching with you really gets you and is very helpful. And if they're not, don't be afraid to say, this isn't working and try somebody else. Because
that's great advice. I think a lot of people are uncomfortable having those conversations. I'm not uncomfortable having that conversation, but I know a lot of people are. And I think that you have to remember with coaching, it's a business relationship, right?
Yeah.
Like you and I are friends because I know you now 10 years, but I still pay you, right? So I have no problem differentiating between Patrick, my friend, and Patrick, I pay you this much a month, so I need to get my ROI, right? And they just need to be direct. Like, look, this is what I want to get out of this. I'm either getting it or I'm not.
Yeah. A good coach adapts to different people and different desires. So I always tell my clients at the beginning, which is kind of shocking because they're thinking me in that expert role. And I do have some expertise, but I'm like, I'm a black hole of ignorance about you and your firm. There's an infinite amount of things for me to learn about you and your firm. So a lot of my job at first is asking just questions, finding out about who you are and what's going on in your firm. And, so there's a lot of learning process. So you want to pick a coach who's committed to learning about you and committed to learning your people and the particulars of your practice. Your coach needs to get who you are and go with that, which means sometimes I'm telling Tom, hey, slow down. Let's take a look at this. This one's worthy of not just having a gut reaction on. Gut reactions are great, but once your tax accountant making a gut decision, right? This is one of those. Let's pull it apart. Let's spend some time on it. And with Herb, sometimes I'm like, look, you just need to, I don't know. God's not available for consulting. He's one of those, right? We just need to make a decision on this and move on to other stuff. If it doesn't work out, we'll pull the plug on it, right? But so your coach should get who you are, right? And I know you've talked about the DISC personality test. The personality test is really, really key to that. The DISC is great, but there are others that are also great. And I use a variety of them, just depending on the person, the circumstance. But that would be one piece of random advice I would throw out there is in terms of getting to know yourself and getting to know your team and your staff. And Tom, you were so big on culture. Central to that is knowing who your people are and getting the right people in the right job, right? So look at Juliet here, right? Juliet's really bright. She's ambitious. She's going places in life. You could put her in any role in your firm and she would do great for a while because that's just who she is. For a while. But because you know her and you've got her DISC, right? You've got her now in a position she can do great for the rest of her career, right? Not just the next 6 months.
Right. Yeah. Oh, and that's something actually for anybody that's listening, because there's a ton of attorneys. I got out of the 8,500 people I'm connected to, probably 75% of them are lawyers at this point. Right. I've actually recommended you and people like you project-based. Because now people hear about the DISC all the time from me and hiring tests, and they're like, hey, who sells it? And I'm like, look, me giving you the name of the person, I'll give you the name of the person. It's $110. But you having a DISC in your hand without somebody like Patrick to make you an expert in it is like giving a non-surgeon a scalpel and say, go try your hand at surgery. I might as well hand them a butter knife and say, go do some surgery because it's a tool, but you need to be trained in it, right? So I said, listen, if you don't want to hire a coach, hire somebody that can at least say to you, I will work with you using the DISC to build out your infrastructure, right? Because there are attorneys here, maybe their mindset is, I don't see value in coaching. Maybe it's project-based consultancy on the DISC or whatever it is. Because, listen, the DISC has been my best friend, right? Yeah. Like just in terms of building out the culture. Now, I think the first question I shoot you anytime we're running an ad is, what's the ideal DISC for this position? Because Juliet was in a position, she's played a couple of different positions. First entry level, then she went into no fault.
I've been all over the firm.
Yeah. She's done a lot of different things and worn different hats.
Well, that's what I said. She can do anything because that's just who she is. But
she would have left. She would have left if she wasn't doing if she wasn't doing marketing, she would have ended up going someplace else because she was doing it as a job, but it wasn't like a calling. Now, I mean, I get texts from her 4:30 in the morning about the podcast coming up and the marketing stuff that we're working on, So that's the difference with the DISC is you can find out what people are going to be best suited for and play to their strengths.
It's easy to find your hedgehog when you know yourself.
Right.
There you go.
Good.
And it's just a tool. It's just a tool to know yourself. It's just a tool. So Patrick, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have a quick question, Patrick. So if you know somebody who is looking for a coach, what one piece of advice would you give somebody who's looking to start their coaching journey?
Well, the short, simple answer would be call Atticus, right? And mention me so I get origination credit.
Of course.
Patrick Wilson told me to call Atticus. But a little bit more nuanced, right? Make sure you call somebody that's got some experience in your kind of business, right? Make sure if you can get a recommendation from somebody, right? So that this is not one where you can go on Avo or Yelp and see how many stars, right? And as you guys know, it's easy to sort of inflate your stars, right? So if you know anybody that's hired a coach, right, talk to them about what coach and how. Beyond that, if you're just totally fishing, you've got no connections or whatever, right, you want to look for people that have experience in your business area, right? So I'm a lawyer. Atticus just does lawyers. Many of the consultants at Atticus are independent contractors. So if we are not consulting with law firms, we are free to consult with other business entities, but we have to fly the Atticus flag if we consult with law firms. So I have my own corporation, and so I occasionally will consult with an accounting firm or some other professional services corporation. I don't do it too much, partly because I know the world of law firms so well, right? So you want somebody that really knows your business, right? So there are general business coaches out there, and look, they'll probably be really helpful. But if you own a law firm, you'd really rather have somebody who is talking to law firms day in and day out. So it's one of those things that is really obvious, but as lawyers, we don't see it, which is this. If you really want to be kind of entrepreneurial, right? You really want to own your own business, right? And not just be a lawyer, right? If you want to be a lawyer and practice law 40 hours a week, fine, right? You can go to the government and do that, right? You can go get a government law job. So there's some people like that. My brother was like that. Fine. I got no problem with that. I respect that. But if you want the benefits of ownership, to make a lot of money, have a lot of free time, right? If you've got that entrepreneurial bent, then what you want to do is get yourself out of all the day-to-day practice of law stuff. Get that to other people. But you've got to get it to other people who are going to do it up to your quality, right? Which means, number one, you're going to have to spend more time and energy over here on the business side, but also you're going to have to get really smart about people, right? You got a freaking doctoral degree over here in the law. You got bupkis for people, probably, right? You got nothing, right? So you better get on the education train for understanding people. What makes people tick? What kind of people do the best job for different positions? How to train them? How to motivate them? How to compensate them? How to fire them if need be when they're not working out? You better get some education about people, because that is the key to your entrepreneurial future. You want to make a lot of money. You want to have a lot of free time. It's going to be because the people that are not you are running all the day-to-day stuff. They're doing all the hands-on stuff. Tom's a great example. Tom is like hands-on with nothing. Tom is in a helicopter, 500 feet above the ground, overseeing the whole thing. But his hands are dirty with nothing. And that's why you're going to take 175 days off this year and make more money than you ever have previously.
100%. And so I can't endorse Atticus or you individually on the individual coaching basis enough. I've never done a group coaching class that you teach, but I know that I was with Atticus with the group program for a very, very long time, and individual program as well with you. And I still am, right? So I cannot recommend you highly enough. I know that your time is very limited in terms of your new client availability, but I know that there is a strata of attorney that can afford to buy your time at this point, and they should, because what you don't know will kill your business eventually, right? It doesn't matter if you're making $2, $4, $5 million a year. If you've understaffed chronically and you don't even know you're understaffed, all you need is one key person to leave. You're going to watch your revenue drop, and then it'll drop and it'll drop. So I don't see how you get to that understanding of people or culture without a coach. I really don't, because they didn't teach it to us in law school. We were so woefully unprepared. And all we ever learned about being out in private practice, quite honestly, is what we learned in the movies. From Charles Dickens, when you hang a freaking shingle out literally on the front, and you're a lawyer all of a sudden. But that's not a business. That's a job.
Right.
You basically have traded in one job for another without any job security, right? So, Patrick, this has been an awesome episode. How do people find you on either social media or email? How do you want people to reach out to you if they want to reach out to you following the episode? We'll put your contact information in the show notes. We'll put Atticus's website in the show notes. But is there any way people could find you on social media?
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me, Patrick Wilson. It's a common name. But if you're watching this show or listening to this show, you're probably already friends with Tom on LinkedIn. So we'll have that connection in common. Or heck, they can email me directly, patrickw@atticusadvantage.com. 2 T's in Atticus, just like Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird. That's where our name comes from. And listen, I want to say this, we help people of all ranges. And even I do. I don't exclusively work with big hitters, right? I work with some, but I mostly like to work with people I like. So I've got people that aren't making $1 million yet, up to a lot of your staff. I don't know, you and I talked about it, like John Ustal, who just got an $85 million verdict on the Celsius energy drink case, right?
Yeah.
But it's fun at both ends of the spectrum.
Well, it's funny because so many of the people that we have on this podcast, I mean, pretty much everybody, I promised when I started this, one of the things I found fascinating was I wanted to deliver value to people listening. So I said, I'm going to have on 7, 8, and 9-figure lawyers, right? That can show you. I'm going to have on coaches that are at the top of the field like you. And I would talk to anybody from Atticus, but everybody that's doing great things, so that if people are 10 to 20 years behind us on the journey, hopefully this helps people. Hopefully it helps them bypass what I've spent in mistakes alone. If I could spare somebody the millions of dollars in mistakes you make when you first open a practice, then it's worth it to me. So again, having you on is great. I'll have you on again. We'll pick different topics, but thank you for coming on and giving us your time today, Patrick. It's been awesome.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Well, I love you guys. So thanks for having me.
We love you too, man. I couldn't do it without you, man. I appreciate you.
All right.
Have a great day.